People often said her life looked like a dream. From the outside, it seemed perfect in every possible way. She lived in a glass-walled house on a quiet hill, drove expensive cars she rarely touched, and attended events where everyone wore smiles that cost more than most homes. She was married to a man the world called a billionaire. A man whose face appeared on business magazines and news channels almost every week. People thought she had everything. But what people saw was only the surface. She had learned early in her marriage that silence was safer than questions. When she asked too much, he became distant. When she stayed quiet, life stayed smooth. Over time, she trained herself to listen more than she spoke, to observe instead of react. This was not because she was weak, but because she understood something most people did not. Power often hides behind calm faces. Her husband was admired for his sharp mind and fearless decisions. He built companies, bought companies, and shut them down without blinking. At events, he spoke with confidence, always surrounded by people eager to impress him. He liked attention. He liked control. And he liked being the smartest person in every room. She knew this well. She had watched him closely for years. At home, things were different. The house was quiet most of the time. Not peaceful, just quiet. Conversations were short and practical. Meals were often eaten alone. He traveled often, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. When he returned, he brought gifts, but not warmth. She accepted both without comment. In the early years, she tried to fix what felt broken. She planned dinners, suggested trips, and tried to talk about their distance. Each attempt ended the same way. He would smile, say he was tired, and promise things would get better once the next deal was done. There was always a next deal. Eventually, she stopped asking. Instead, she focused on learning. While he built his public image, she quietly built knowledge. She sat in meetings she was never meant to attend, listened from corners, and read documents most spouses never saw. She asked questions politely, the kind that sounded innocent but revealed a lot. People underestimated her, and she let them. Being ignored gave her freedom. The first sign of change came slowly. He started guarding his phone. He took calls in another room. He smiled at messages, but not at her. At first, she told herself it was work stress. That was always the easiest excuse. But stress does not make someone emotionally disappear. Late nights became normal. Business trips increased, often announced at the last minute. When she asked simple questions, he brushed them off. His voice grew impatient, sharp in ways it had never been before. Still, she said nothing. She had learned that reacting too soon only helped the person hiding something. Then came the small details. A new scent on his clothes. A name mentioned casually and then avoided. A sudden interest in changing his appearance. These things alone meant nothing, but together they painted a picture she could no longer ignore. She did not confront him. She did not cry or beg. She waited. Waiting was something she had mastered. She waited while the world praised him. She waited while people assumed she was lucky. She waited while rumors whispered around her at parties. Some guests looked at her with pity, others with curiosity. No one knew what she knew, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The first public crack appeared at a charity event. Cameras flashed, guests laughed, and music filled the air. He arrived late, confident as always. But this time, he was not alone in the way he usually was. He stood too close to a young woman, one who laughed a little too easily at his jokes. When introductions were made, he barely looked at his wife. She noticed everything. The way his body turned away from her, the way the woman avoided her eyes, the way the people around them sensed something but pretended not to. She smiled politely, played her role perfectly, and said nothing. That night, headlines praised his donation. No one mentioned the tension standing right beside him. Days later, a photo appeared online. It was blurry but clear enough. Him, the woman. A restaurant in another city. The internet did what it always does. Speculation spread fast. Some defended him. Some attacked him. Many searched for her reaction. She did not give them one. Inside the house, he acted as if nothing had happened. When she asked about the trip, he said it was business. When she mentioned the photo, he laughed and called it gossip. His confidence returned quickly, almost too quickly. He believed he was untouchable. She listened. She watched. And she began preparing. That night after he fell asleep, she opened the laptop she kept hidden in a drawer. It contained years of records, notes, and copies of documents she had collected quietly. Contracts, emails, ownership details. She reviewed them carefully, not with anger, but with clarity. This was not an emotional moment for her. It was a practical one. She remembered the early days. The company was nothing more than an idea and a few borrowed rooms. She had been there then, helping quietly, signing papers he told her not to worry about. Back then, he trusted her completely. He never imagined she would read every line. As the affair rumors grew louder, people expected her to leave or make a scene. Friends sent messages asking if she was okay. Reporters waited for a statement. She stayed silent. Silence made people uncomfortable. Silence made them curious. Silence gave her time. At another event, he arrived openly with the same woman. This time, cameras caught everything clearly. The story exploded. Social media took sides. Some blamed her for staying. Some mocked her for being quiet. Few understood that her silence was not surrender. When she returned home that night, she did not cry. She did not argue. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights below. Every building, every street, every company office reminded her of something important. None of it was truly his alone. She thought about the long years of being underestimated, about the patience it took to let people believe what they wanted, about the moment that was coming, whether he realized it or not. She knew one thing for certain. This story was far from over. While the world focused on his affair, no one noticed what she was quietly setting in motion. The papers were already in place. The truth was already written. And soon, everyone would see that the woman they ignored was never powerless at all. The affair continued to grow, and the world noticed before she did. Or at least, that's how it seemed to everyone else. She saw the signs long before any headline appeared. She had watched the late-night texts, the hurried trips, the whispered conversations on the phone. She had learned not to overreact, to observe, and to think. Every little thing mattered. When the news finally broke, it was like a storm hitting a quiet town. People crowded around screens, refreshed social media accounts, and talked in hushed tones at events. The young woman he was involved with became the focus of gossip columns and online discussions. Reporters tried to get statements from her. Friends called to check if she was okay. Strangers offered advice she did not need. She remained quiet, letting the world build the story while she stayed out of the chaos. Inside the house, things became tense in ways people couldn't see. Conversations that had always been brief became even shorter. Shared dinners were replaced by separate meals. He thought he was untouchable because he had the world watching him, thinking he was powerful and desired. What he didn't realize was that power is not only in what people see, but in what they do not see. She spent her time in ways he never noticed. She started documenting everything carefully, making notes about every interaction, every unusual behavior, every trip. She kept track of his meetings, the locations of his calls, the timing of his absences. To anyone else, it seemed like she was still living quietly, accepting her role as a wife in the public eye. But in reality, she was gathering knowledge that would soon change everything. One evening, she went through old files, searching for patterns. She found receipts, contracts, and old correspondence that revealed the extent of her involvement in the empire she had helped build. The documents were there, untouched for years, proving that while he was in the spotlight, she had quietly secured a foundation beneath everything he claimed as his own. Her presence in the business world was invisible to most, but it had been powerful all along. Meanwhile, he became bolder. He did not hide the relationship anymore. At galas, at charity events, and even in casual gatherings, he openly spent time with the young woman. He smiled at the cameras, confident that no one could touch him. People assumed his wife would leave him or demand a public confrontation. They were wrong. Her silence unnerved him in ways he did not understand. Every glance he threw her way was met with calm observation, not anger or panic. This calm became her advantage. While he was focused on living a double life in public, she prepared quietly. She met with lawyers under the guise of routine business, reviewed contracts, and made sure that everything she had quietly arranged years ago was intact. Every detail mattered. The documents she had gathered, the emails she had kept, the signatures she had secured, they were her power. He did not notice it. He never did. Confidence can blind people to danger that seems obvious in retrospect. He believed he was untouchable because he controlled the narrative. But he had forgotten one important detail. The person he thought he controlled had been preparing for the moment when control would shift. Friends and acquaintances began asking her why she stayed. Some thought she was naive. Some thought she was loyal beyond reason. She smiled politely, saying nothing that could give them the wrong impression. Every interaction was a performance. She performed kindness, patience, and understanding. People praised her for it, not realizing it was strategic. It's not emotional. One evening, she received an invitation to an exclusive event-a-gathering of influential people, investors, and media figures. He planned to attend with his partner, thinking it would impress everyone. She accepted too, not to compete, but to observe. Every smile he gave, every handshake, every conversation, she noted mentally. She was learning the patterns, understanding his habits, and memorizing the details that would later be crucial at the event. The young woman trailed behind him, attempting to mirror his confidence. But Eleanor noticed the subtle hesitations, the way she looked at people, how she moved in the room. Her nervous glances revealed insecurity beneath the surface charm. Meanwhile, Eleanor moved calmly, acknowledging greetings, shaking hands, and listening without speaking too much. Her presence was quiet but noticeable in a different way. She exuded calm authority without showing off. The press focused on him and his companion, capturing photos that would appear in newspapers the next day. But one journalist, observing carefully, noticed Eleanor standing calmly in the background, watching the interactions, making notes on her phone. There was a subtle difference in her demeanor. The world did not yet understand it, but there was a quiet force in her presence. Back home, she reflected on the evening. She had seen enough to confirm patterns and habits that would help her later. She realized that while people were distracted by scandal, she had an opportunity. The chaos he had created gave her a window to act when the time was right. She would not act immediately, but she prepared herself for the exact moment when revealing the truth would have maximum impact. Days turned into weeks, and his confidence grew. He did not suspect that his empire could slip from his hands, because he never considered the quiet presence he had always ignored. He boasted about his achievements, bragged to friends, and flaunted wealth he thought was untouchable. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks were forming in ways he did not anticipate. She continued her daily routine, walking through the halls of the house, observing the city lights outside, reviewing documents, and planning her next moves carefully. She knew that patience was her ally, and impulsive reactions could ruin everything she had prepared. Her life had taught her that the right timing often mattered more than immediate action as the public scandal grew. More people reached out to her. Some wanted to offer support. Others tried to get information about the affair. She remained silent, polite, and composed. Silence was powerful. It forced people to think she might be indifferent, unbothered, or too sophisticated to react. In truth, she was quietly building the foundation for her next steps. Steps that would leave no room for doubt. She remembered the early days of her marriage, the way she had helped him build his empire quietly. She remembered the contracts she had signed, the strategic moves she had suggested, and the ways she had protected assets without recognition. All of it had been invisible work, but invisible work can be the most powerful. The empire he flaunted as his own was partly hers. He did not know it yet, but the truth was ready to reveal itself. Every day, she reminded herself that this was not about revenge, but about fairness. She did not want to humiliate him unnecessarily. She wanted to show reality. The world believed one story, but she had the evidence to reveal another. Her preparation was methodical, careful, and strategic. While he continued his public displays, she remained in the shadows, unnoticed but fully aware. She interacted with staff, investors, and associates with a polite calm that disguised her awareness. She listened more than she spoke, smiled without revealing her thoughts, and kept her emotions in check. To the outside world, she was the quiet, patient wife. Inside, she was a strategist, waiting for the perfect moment. The first public appearance of the affair had already weakened his image slightly. People whispered, speculated, and some began questioning his judgment. Yet he ignored these signs, believing they would fade with time. He did not realize that his arrogance was his biggest weakness. She continued to watch, plan, and document. Her notebooks and digital files were organized meticulously, every detail accounted for. She had the power to act, but she waited. She understood that timing and precision mattered more than emotion. Every move he made, every public misstep, was information she could use. One night, alone in the study, she reflected on the unfolding events. Her mind was calm, her focus sharp. She did not feel anger, though she acknowledged the betrayal. Instead, she felt clarity. Betrayal does not always need a reaction. Sometimes it requires observation, patience, and preparation. She knew that when the moment came, the world would be surprised by the quiet woman they had underestimated. And she knew that the empire he believed was entirely his own was already partially under her control, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. Her calm, quiet life had prepared her for this exact situation. She was not powerless, and she never had been. She was ready. She had learned over the years that power is often invisible. It is not the loud speeches, the flashing cameras, or the applause from strangers that make someone strong. It is knowledge, preparation, and the ability to remain calm when everyone else is panicking. She carried this understanding with her as the scandal around her husband continued to grow. It did not surprise her. It did not overwhelm her. She was prepared. The world saw him as a man who could do anything, someone untouchable. But she knew the truth, and she had proof. The empire he presented to the world, the empire everyone assumed he controlled, was built on foundations that included her decisions, her guidance, and her signatures. No one else could see it, but she had documented every detail meticulously over the years. She had waited for the exact right moment to reveal it. And she knew that moment was approaching as the affair became more public. He made missteps. In his arrogance, he assumed that wealth alone would protect him. He signed contracts without consulting the right people, made hasty business decisions, and ignored warnings from advisors. He flaunted his confidence, unaware that she had been quietly analyzing every move. Each error added to the picture she had been creating in her mind. A complete understanding of how to take control when the time was right. She spent hours reviewing documents, revisiting past deals, and cross-referencing ownership papers. The company's assets, patents, and properties were far more entangled than anyone realized. Many were registered under her name, either directly or through trusts she had set up quietly. No one questioned them because she had always been seen as the supportive wife, not a business strategist. Her silence had been her greatest advantage. Meanwhile, he grew careless. Public appearances with his companion became bolder. He laughed too loudly at events, showed off wealth he did not fully own, and failed to recognize the growing scrutiny from the business world. Investors whispered doubts, employees speculated, and the media began asking questions she had anticipated. She stayed calm, observing without reacting. Letting the storm rage around her, she remembered the nights she spent learning the inner workings of the business, often alone in the study, while he attended lavish parties. She had listened to conversations, read documents, and asked questions that seemed innocent but revealed critical information. Over the years, she had built a mental map of the empire, understanding the connections that no one else could see. This knowledge was power, and she wielded it silently. One evening, she received a message from an investor friend who had noticed irregularities in company reports. They were concerned, but they did not know how serious the situation was. She listened carefully, asked questions, and reassured them with calm authority. They did not realize she already had the complete picture. She did not panic. She did not overreact. Instead, she planned her next steps, making sure every move would be deliberate and precise. Her husband continued to believe he was untouchable. He did not realize that his actions were creating vulnerabilities that she could exploit. Each public misstep, each careless decision, and each moment of arrogance was recorded in her mental ledger. She knew the exact timing and sequence needed to reveal the truth in a way that would have maximum impact. Patience had become her greatest ally. At home, she began subtly reminding him of her involvement in the business. Casual comments about past decisions, indirect mentions of her presence in key meetings, and gentle questions about his recent choices all served to unsettle him without revealing her full plan. He laughed at these remarks, assuming they were minor, but they planted seeds of doubt. He could not see the larger picture. And she was careful to keep it that way. She also strengthened her relationships with key employees. Quiet conversations in the hallways, shared lunches, casual check-ins helped her gain insight into the company's inner workings. People trusted her because she had always been supportive and professional, never threatening their positions. She listened more than she spoke, asking questions that seemed harmless but revealed critical information. She built alliances quietly, ensuring that when the time came, she would have support. In her personal life, she maintained the appearance of calm composure. Friends and family saw a woman who was dignified and patient. She smiled at gatherings, attended social events, and remained polite in public. No one suspected the careful planning and strategy that went on behind closed doors. She had mastered the art of appearing serene while preparing for a major reveal. The affair, while public, had its limits. She noticed the young woman was cautious, aware of her presence and influence. The young woman tried to charm the people around her, but Eleanor noticed the inconsistencies and subtle signs of insecurity. She made mental notes, observing patterns and behavior that would later help her anticipate moves and plan her own actions with precision. One afternoon, while reviewing financial documents, she discovered a minor loophole that could have caused significant problems if misused. She considered alerting her husband, but she did not. Instead, she documented it carefully, knowing that it could strengthen her position when the truth was revealed. Her focus was not on revenge, but on accuracy and fairness. She wanted the world to see reality. It's not a spectacle. The media continued to cover the affair, highlighting his arrogance and her silence. Some speculated she would take dramatic action. Others assumed she had no power and would quietly leave. They were all wrong. She had power that no one could see, and she was preparing to show it in a way that would leave no room for doubt. Her calm, measured approach ensured that every step she took was deliberate and effective. She also took time to reflect on her own strength. The years of being underestimated, overlooked, and assumed to be passive had honed her resilience. She had faced challenges in silence, learned from mistakes, and built knowledge that was invisible but potent. Her life had taught her patience, strategy, and observation. Now, these qualities were her tools. As the weeks passed, she began mapping out the sequence of actions needed to reveal her position in the company. She considered the timing, the audience, and the method. Every detail mattered. She reviewed past meetings, financial reports, and public statements to ensure she understood the implications of her actions. This preparation was meticulous, thorough, and deliberate. She also considered the personal aspect. While the affair was a betrayal, her focus was not on personal revenge. She wanted fairness, recognition, and clarity. The world needed to understand that the empire her husband flaunted was not solely his creation. Her contributions, decisions, and foresight had been critical. She wanted the truth, not humiliation. One night, she walked through the city streets, reflecting on the upcoming steps. The lights of the buildings, the quiet hum of activity, and the lives moving around her reminded her of the larger picture. She understood that power is often quiet, subtle, and invisible until revealed. She was ready to reveal it. She returned home and reviewed her documents one last time before taking a break. Her strategy was clear. Her knowledge was complete. Her patience had brought her to this point. She understood the empire, its vulnerabilities, and the timing needed to shift control. She was calm, composed, and ready. The empire her husband believed he fully controlled was ready to be shown for what it truly was. She would not act out of anger, but with clarity, precision, and fairness. She knew that when the moment came, the world would be surprised. And he would finally understand that the quiet woman he underestimated had always held power that no one else could see. She had waited, and the right time was near. The moment she had been preparing for finally arrived. She knew it would not be sudden. Timing was crucial. Every step had to be precise, every detail in place. She reviewed her notes one last time, ensuring that her actions would be understood clearly by everyone. This was not about revenge. It was about revealing the truth that had been hidden for years. The day began like any other. But she felt a quiet excitement. She moved through her morning routine calmly, dressing carefully yet without extravagance, making sure her appearance reflected confidence and composure. Every gesture mattered. She understood that perception could influence how people received the truth. Her calm was her armor. He, unaware of what was coming, continued his usual routine. He arrived at the office with the same confident smile, shaking hands and greeting staff as if nothing had changed. He believed he was untouchable, that the world would continue to see him as the sole owner and leader of his empire. He did not realize that his wife had quietly built a position of power that would soon be undeniable. She called a meeting with the company's board and key investors under the pretense of a routine update. Her calm demeanor and quiet authority immediately set her apart. People were curious, some even slightly nervous, because she rarely took the lead in such meetings. She welcomed everyone politely, asking questions and listening carefully. Her presence commanded respect without demanding it. As the meeting progressed, she began to introduce details of the company's structure that most had assumed were fully controlled by him. She spoke about assets, ownership, and decisions that had been made with her approval or under her direction. She presented documents, emails, and contracts that demonstrated her involvement clearly and legally. The room grew silent as the realization settled in. Much of what had been thought to belong entirely to him was legally under her control. He arrived halfway through the meeting, expecting to lead and impress as usual. When he saw her confidently addressing the room, presenting documents, and explaining intricate details with authority, he froze for a moment. The cameras and the media coverage would later capture the exact look on his face, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and the first flicker of fear. His empire, which he had flaunted publicly, was now being shown for what it truly was. She continued calmly, explaining the legal structures, the trusts, the assets that were under her name. Investors listened, some whispering to each other, trying to grasp the depth of her involvement. The board members shifted in their seats, realizing that her control was not only significant but undeniable. Every paper, every contract, and every signature she had quietly accumulated over the years now became evidence of her authority. He tried to interrupt, to regain control, but she spoke with quiet firmness, never raising her voice, never showing anger. Her calm made him look desperate, flustered, and unprepared. She had anticipated every objection he could make and was ready with clear, factual responses. The more he tried to assert himself, the more the room recognized her authority. Media representatives outside were already reporting the meeting in real time. Headlines would later read that the wife of the billionaire was not only a silent partner, but the legal owner of a substantial portion of the empire. The scandal that had centered on his personal life now extended to business, and he could no longer hide behind his charm or wealth. The world's perception was shifting. She paused during her presentation, letting the gravity of her revelations settle in. The room was silent, everyone absorbing the information. Some staff members looked at her with newfound respect, realizing that her quiet presence over the years had been more than just supportive. It had been strategic, intelligent, and powerful. The power she had wielded quietly was now visible to all. He attempted to respond, but she remained composed. She acknowledged his presence politely, but continued speaking to the board and investors. Her words were precise, measured, and factual. She explained how the company had been structured, how decisions had been influenced, and how assets had been managed. Every statement was supported by documentation. There was no room for dispute. The young woman he had been involved with was nowhere to be seen. She realized that Eleanor's calm and authority had already shifted the balance of power. The presence of a confident, knowledgeable, and prepared woman had undermined the influence the companion had attempted to gain. Eleanor's preparation, patience, and quiet observation had ensured that no one could challenge her credibility. As the meeting concluded, board members and investors expressed support for her leadership. They acknowledged her legal and strategic authority, and some even suggested she take a more prominent role in the company. She accepted their respect with grace, understanding that recognition was now firmly in her hands. Her calm authority had turned the situation from scandal to opportunity. He left the meeting, realizing that the empire he had flaunted was no longer under his complete control. He understood finally that his arrogance, his carelessness, and his underestimation of his wife had led to this moment. He had assumed she was powerless, silent, and unaware. In reality, she had been preparing for this exact scenario, building influence and knowledge that could not be ignored. The world watched as the news spread. Headlines shifted from focusing on his affair to highlighting her strategic control of the empire. Social media buzzed with admiration for her intelligence and composure. People began to see that her silence had been deliberate, her patience intentional, and her authority genuine. The narrative had changed, and she was at the center. At home that evening, she reflected on the events of the day. She did not celebrate loudly or boast. Instead, she allowed herself a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her preparation and patience had worked. The empire was now recognized as partially hers, and her authority was acknowledged publicly. She had not acted out of anger, but with clarity and fairness. Her husband, once confident and untouchable, was now forced to reevaluate his position. He understood that his actions, his affair, and his arrogance had contributed to his diminished control. The world had seen the truth, and there was no turning back. He could no longer claim sole ownership or leadership of the empire, and he realized that underestimating his wife had been his greatest mistake. She continued to manage the company with calm authority, making strategic decisions and guiding operations with intelligence and foresight. Investors and staff trusted her, knowing that her leadership was grounded in knowledge and preparation. Her presence had transformed the company, not through spectacle, but through quiet, deliberate action. While the world focused on the personal drama, the real story was her strategy, her patience, and her ability to act with precision. The empire had shifted in her favor, not through confrontation, but through careful planning and understanding of the true dynamics at play. Her calm, measured approach had revealed the truth, ensuring that she was recognized for her rightful role. The day ended with a sense of closure, though not of finality. She knew that her husband would need to adapt, and that the company would continue to evolve under her guidance. She had achieved her goal. The world understood her authority, and the empire was no longer solely his to command. She had turned betrayal into an opportunity for recognition, clarity, and fairness. In that moment, she realized the power of patience, knowledge, and quiet preparation. The affair, the public humiliation, and the years of underestimation had all led to this turning point. She had shown that true strength is often invisible until revealed, and that calm authority can surpass arrogance and recklessness. The empire was hers, not by confrontation, but by understanding, foresight, and strategic action. She walked through the office one last time that evening, observing the staff, the quiet hum of activity, and the signs of a company stabilized under her leadership. She smiled softly, knowing that the world had witnessed the shift, that her efforts had been recognized, and that the truth had been revealed. Her husband's confidence had been shaken, the empire had shifted, and she had emerged as the true force behind it all. The aftermath of the revelation was unlike anything she had expected, yet exactly as she had prepared. The public was no longer focused solely on the affair, but on her intelligence, her calm, and her strategic insight. Investors, staff, and even the media acknowledged her role in the empire. Seeing for the first time, the quiet force that had always been at work behind the scenes. She did not feel triumph or revenge. Instead, she felt clarity and control. The satisfaction that comes from knowing the truth was finally recognized. Her husband, once untouchable and confident, had to come to terms with a reality he had never imagined. He attempted to regain some authority, but every action he took reminded others of the imbalance that had been revealed. He tried to make decisions independently, but investors and staff were already aligned with her vision. The empire he had flaunted was no longer solely his to command, and the world was aware of it. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. She continued to manage the company with quiet confidence. She did not boast, she did not demand attention, but her decisions reflected foresight and intelligence. Staff began looking to her for guidance, investors for strategic insights, and the media for recognition of her leadership. She understood that true authority is not enforced through force, but demonstrated through competence and consistency. Her calm and measured approach had won their respect. In her personal life, she found peace. The betrayal that had once felt like a weight now seemed like a lesson in patience and strategy. She had proven to herself that silence and observation were not weakness, but tools of strength. Her reputation, which had been quietly underestimated, was now solid and respected. She had shown that actions speak louder than appearances and that intelligence and preparation can overcome arrogance. People who had previously doubted her abilities began to approach her for advice and guidance. Friends, colleagues, and even former skeptics recognized her insight and discretion. She remained approachable, kind, and composed, demonstrating that true power does not require dominance, but understanding. Her influence grew not through confrontation, but through quiet, consistent demonstration of her abilities. Her husband, though still present in the company, was relegated to a lesser role. He had lost credibility in the eyes of investors and staff, and his previous arrogance made reconciliation difficult. He realized, finally, that underestimating her had been a critical mistake. The empire he believed he owned was now recognized as a shared reality, with her authority firmly established. His public image suffered, not due to scandal alone, but because the world now understood the depth of her intelligence and foresight. She also took the time to connect with the employees she had quietly supported over the years. She understood their challenges, their ambitions, and their dedication. Her leadership was inclusive, empowering, and strategic. She had learned that real influence comes from understanding people, building trust, and acting with integrity. The respect she earned was authentic and enduring. Media coverage began highlighting her story, focusing on her calm intelligence rather than the sensational affair. Interviews, articles, and features painted her as a figure of strategic brilliance and quiet authority. People admired her for not reacting impulsively, for remaining composed, and for demonstrating strength through knowledge and preparation. Her story became an example of how patience and insight can transform adversity into opportunity. In her private moments, she reflected on the journey. She remembered the early years of her marriage, the times she had been overlooked, and the careful attention she had paid to every detail of the empire. The patience she had cultivated, the knowledge she had gathered, and the quiet strategies she had employed had all culminated in this moment. She understood the value of preparation and the power of calm observation. She also realized the personal growth she had achieved. The betrayal, while painful, had been a catalyst for her transformation. She had learned to trust her instincts, to act strategically, and to recognize her own value. She had become stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own influence. Her personal strength matched her professional authority, and she carried both with grace. As time passed, she continued to guide the company, expanding its reach, enhancing its reputation, and ensuring that its operations reflected her vision. Her husband adapted, learning to accept his position and the reality of her authority. Though their relationship had changed, respect and acknowledgement replaced conflict. The empire, once dominated by arrogance, now thrived under her steady, intelligent guidance. She also engaged in philanthropy and mentorship, supporting causes and individuals she believed in. Her influence extended beyond the business world, touching communities and inspiring others to recognize the value of patience, preparation, and quiet strength. She demonstrated that power does not always need to be loud to be effective, and that true leadership is measured by impact, not display. In social circles, she became a symbol of intelligence and composure. People admired her ability to navigate complex situations with calm and clarity. Her story inspired those who had faced underestimation or betrayal, showing that careful observation, strategic planning, and patience could transform adversity into triumph. Her authority was recognized not only in business, but in the broader world, establishing her as a figure of influence and respect. Ultimately, she realized that the affair, the public scrutiny, and the years of patience had all led to a profound personal and professional victory. She had proven her competence, demonstrated her authority, and secured recognition for her contributions. Her husband's affair, once a source of public embarrassment, had inadvertently revealed her strength, intelligence. In a rightful place at the helm, she continued to move forward with clarity, focus, and purpose. Every decision she made, every action she took, reflected the experience, knowledge, and wisdom she had accumulated over the years. Her authority was now recognized and respected, and the empire flourished under her guidance. She had turned betrayal into opportunity, underestimation into recognition, and patience into lasting influence. In her personal reflections, she understood the lessons of her journey. Strength comes from knowledge, patience, and calm observation. True authority is demonstrated through action and competence, not loud proclamations. Respect is earned through consistency, intelligence, and integrity. She had lived these lessons, and the world now saw their impact. She had achieved what few could, turning a personal challenge into a story of triumph, respect, and enduring influence. She continued to live with dignity, calm, and intelligence. Every day reminded her that her actions had consequences, and her preparation had ensured the best possible outcome. She had reclaimed control, established authority, and gained recognition. The empire she had quietly built and guided was now fully acknowledged. Her journey from betrayal to empowerment had reached its full potential, leaving her not only victorious but respected, admired, and truly free.